Donald Trump Jr., the Senate health care bill, and net neutrality. I'm Simon Harrington, and this is the Square Circle.
If you have a passion for helping people, want to launch a new charity, or need to raise funds, Voluntary Solutions can help. You have a passion for helping people. We have a passion for helping you. Visit voluntarysolutionsdc.com, 844-739-5488.
Hello and welcome to the Square Circle. I'm your host, Simon Harrington. Joining us today are Gregory Clay of gdclay.com, Leif Larson of Craft DC, and Dr. Kate Tulenko of the National Physicians Alliance. Welcome, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
The ongoing Russia scandal has ensnared yet another of President Trump's inner circle, this time the president's own son, Donald Jr. The New York Times reported this week that Donald Jr. met with a Russian lawyer last summer, expecting to receive damaging information on Hillary Clinton from the Russian government. Gregory Clay.
Yes.
Is this a story that is finally turning on Hillary Clinton, or is it just another bad week for the president?
I would say it's another bad week in a continuum for Donald Trump. Now, and this time it's about his children, namely Junior. Junior, there's three things you can say about Junior right now that are definitive, that's definite. One, he's on the cover of the new issue of Time magazine. Black and white photo, headline says, red-handed, in red, of course. We can all get the symbolism there, okay? Two, he's great for ratings. When Sean Hannity had him on Tuesday night, exclusive interview, first primetime interview since this story broke, Sean Hannity's ratings were through the roof. 2.9 viewers for Sean Hannity. Second was MSNBC in that time slot at 2.3 million viewers. Third was CNN with Don Lemon's show, 1.1 million viewers. So Sean Hannity tripled. Think about that. Just because he had Donald Trump Jr. on an exclusive interview, he tripled CNN's viewership for that time slot, 10 to 11. Three, Donald Trump Jr. right now might be the most wanted man in the United States. The dude is wanted big time. Who wants him? Dianne Feinstein wants him, in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Wants him to openly to testify at open hearings. Democrat Chuck Grassley wants him, Republican senator from Iowa. I guess that's one thing that Democrats and Republicans can agree on. We want Donald Jr. And it's going to be interesting. Apparently the letters have been sent, and it will be interesting to see what happens in the next few days and weeks as we and the media and the White House, everybody in the world, I guess, discovers, did he commit any kind of violations, whether criminal or whatever, in regards to campaign finance laws, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure Larson will discuss the Ukraine and Donald Trump Jr.'s naivete as we go along.
I'm going to give Dr. Tulenko a chance. How would you view the story now that Donald Trump Jr. is involved in?
I think that some of the most interesting analysis was given by former Watergate prosecutor Jill Weinstock. She said that a bright line has been crossed here, that campaign law says that you cannot accept anything of value from a foreign citizen in the context of a political campaign. And opposition research is clearly something of value. And she said that it does not actually have to be received, that if you plan and take actions, responding to an email, saying in particular, this will be useful towards the end of the summer, that's when opposition data is most powerful right before an election. Meeting the person, even if the meeting was a complete bust, the fact that that meeting occurred really crossed that bright line. And then also now there's these reports that the Trump campaign may have given data to the Russians about states that were swing states, and that the Russians used it to help target their email campaigns.
Okay.
I haven't
Leif.
figured this out. Either the Russians are brilliant people who know how to manipulate American people better than most of our politicians can, or they're complete idiots and require us to give them the data on how to target swing states. I will agree with you on this. Hillary Clinton couldn't figure out how to target people in swing states. That's why she lost the election. This is all fantasy. The only true thing out of this is Donald Trump Jr. is an idiot. I mean, I think everybody can agree on that. Yeah. He has a third-party friend who is a huckster music producer who has one client in the Ukraine, in Russia, who is a rapper, and supposedly Donald Trump Jr. believes him when he says, hey, this woman has been given some information by the Russians that could be pointing out illegal contributions to the Democratic National Committee. You should meet with her. And Jr. says, great, I love it. I think that shows he was a complete moron. I don't think you're going to be able to show, and I don't think any criminal court will ever accept that information given to somebody it has a particular value to it. We could say that the dossier that was produced by Fusion GPS, that was based on supposedly Trump hanging out with prostitutes and urinating on beds and all this type of stuff. This information was garnered through Russian connections. Does that have value, and should that have been, classified as accepting information from people? The only thing we do know is that the DNC and the Clinton campaign had people in the Ukrainian embassy giving them information because they went there and had meetings with the Ukrainian ambassador and wanted a meeting with the Ukrainian president, which they finally said that's enough. We'll give you a private liaison to give you the information, which I don't think has any value to it, but that's the only collusion that's proven so far. I don't think this points to anything but stupidity by somebody who wanted approval from his dad.
Well, this whole thing seems to come down to the word value, as the doctor just said. It reminds me of Bill Clinton. Remember back in 1998 during the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal, and Bill Clinton said famously or infamously, whichever your choice, depends on what the definition of is. This could be about, it depends on the definition of what value, V-A-L-U-E, is. And this, it appears that's where this thing is going. And that obviously is open to interpretation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it'll eventually come down to a legal decision by either the Department of Justice or Mueller or whoever wants to make that thing, but I think that's pushing the boundaries of what the definition of value is.
Anything to add?
I'd say ignorance of the law excuses no one, and it doesn't matter if people are political newcomers, you have to follow the law.
All right. I'd like to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. Also this week, Senate Republicans introduced a new version of their health care bill. It contains concessions to both conservative and moderate members of the party, but its chances for passage are still unclear. Dr. Tulenko, how do you view that there are enough concessions in this bill that the Democrats will now be happy when we can move forward?
The Democrats are not happy. I don't think they'll get any Democratic votes, but I think they now have enough Republican votes to pass it next week. They'll be able to debate it and pass it next week, and that's due to a number of concessions they've made to get some of the more conservative Republicans on board, as well as some of the more moderate Republicans. Some of those concessions include offering more bare bones insurance plans, and that makes the conservatives happy. The problem with these plans is it really gives the appearance of insurance coverage without actual protection. They rarely cover preventive care, which is the most cost-effective type of care, and often they don't have enough catastrophic care to really prevent these catastrophic bills. We need to remember that illness and medical bills are the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the U.S. and, in fact, the world. Some of the other concessions is this $43 billion for opiate addiction, to treat that addiction. And there I think we also need to remember that the opiate crisis was actually caused by cost-cutting measures. Back pain and other orthopedic pain used to be managed through physical therapy. This was more expensive in the short run, but actually cheaper in the long run. You had better outcomes, people were more likely to return to work. When you switch to sort of the faster idea of giving people pain medicines, getting them back more quickly, more of them became addicted, and actually more opioids got out in the community and ensnared non-patients. And so it's interesting to see that we're trying to address this crisis now. Another change that was made is 2 of the taxes that were in the Affordable Care Act are now being preserved. In the original version of the bill, they were cut.
All right. Leif, how would you like?
I think you're right on some of the catastrophic health care plans. Now, younger people will find those more appealing to them as a cheaper rate because a lot of times they think they're invulnerable.
It's better than nothing.
But it is good for older people too who don't want to have maternity coverage pay for or have to pay for it. You know, if I'm 65, I think my children days are over. Although with medical advances, we may be looking at that as a different thing later.
No.
But I mean, that's what, those things that were included in I never like to say Obamacare. I mean, the ACA
We shouldn't politicize
was what was driving people crazy, because why should I be paying money for maternity care when I'm not going to have children? And that was basically to subsidize younger people who are having children, who were getting government subsidized payments for having children also. So I think there's a little give and take. We can probably say that for sure, along with no Democrats voting for this. Rand Paul will not be voting for it either, because all he wants is a complete nullification of the ACA and start from scratch sometime later. But I think you're right. There probably will be a vote, and I think it's going to pass.
Gregory Clay, how would you like to add to the healthcare debate here?
Well, I'm going Hollywood. Apparently, as the doctor and Larson will say, it's all a Republican show on this. Now, as far as the American people, in terms of the majority and in terms of, I think, caring people, et cetera, I think this will come down to the Jimmy Kimmel litmus test. Remember that night Jimmy Kimmel on his show gave that teary soliloquy about his ailing child and how he saw how people who can't afford health care, how can they make it with the high premiums and the problems that the Republicans are posing and the Democrats are haggling and this and that. They can't get anything solved. And yes, Jimmy Kimmel is an entertainer, but I think that night he resonated with a lot of folk in this country. You can say whatever you want, and if this thing passes, Jimmy Kimmel is going to address this issue on his show soon after if this new bill passes. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when he does his show on this and how the American populace reacts to it.
If I were advising the Republicans on this, I would tell them that an efficient healthcare system is actually an issue of national economic competitiveness. Chrysler Chairman Lee Iacocca famously said that poor health and an inefficient health system added $600 to the cost of every Chrysler car. You compare the American system to the Japanese and the German systems, they get better health for less money. It really is an economic competitiveness issue. Also, there are currently 1 million open healthcare jobs in the U.S. It's easier to fill an existing job than to create a new one. So from a jobs creation point of view, from a getting people to work point of view, investing in healthcare really is the way to go. There's also been a lot of talk lately about coal miners and coal workers. There are actually more physical therapists in the U.S. than coal miners. And no one's talking about the physical therapy lobby. Physical therapists make about $84,000 a year, and no one gets black lung. We really need to look at this from an economic competitiveness point of view.
Most people out of the Appalachian Mountains aren't going to be physical therapists. Either, they're going to be digging coal, which is still required to meet our energy costs.
There's a health worker shortage in Appalachia.
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely.
You can train people. Every year, American nursing schools turn away tens of thousands of qualified applicants. At the same time, that in record numbers, we are importing health workers from some of the sickest and poorest countries in the world. So we're under-investing in Americans
and our own people
and damaging countries.
Exactly.
So we really need to invest in Americans to train them to be healthcare workers.
Right. Gotcha.
Anybody want to add?
Well, I mean, I think the only thing that's going to come of this too is that the next step is this is not what was sent over from the House of Representatives. So if the Senate comes up with this bill and it ends up passing, like we kind of all agree that it will, for not with any other problems that could come up, and They always do, to seem with the Trump White House that going on and on. But how will this reflect what can get passed again in the House, which is a completely unruly organization, and is even harder than what McConnell has had to overcome in trying to, tap down demands and problems there. So I think, after it passes here, it's going to have to, something's going to have to
Let's
happen.
give
And,
Gregory
and
Clay
it's
the last
also-
word on this.
And it's also interesting that the two senators, Lindsey Graham and Dr. Bill Cassidy, proposed the idea of turning most of the decision-making to the states, with giving the states those block grants. And that's kind of interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, Doctor, states have the option they want to basically keep Obamacare if they under the two senators, Lindsey Graham and Dr. Cassidy, and or you can shape it essentially whichever. It's kind of like a molding situation, like clay. You can, they are allowing the states to essentially mold affordable health care into whatever kind of situation they want.
Okay. All right, we're all good with the healthcare? All right, great. And finally, liberal activists marked a day of action this week on net neutrality. Here's the story from CBS News.
Tech companies like Facebook, Google, and Netflix are joining a day of action today to protest an FCC plan to roll back rules on net neutrality from the Obama era. The current rules ban internet service providers from treating internet traffic differently based on the source. They're meant to ensure corporate interests don't get favorable treatment.
And Leif, Larson, perhaps you could, for the sake of people that are not so technically savvy, you could explain what is net neutrality?
Well, I'll give you my definition. I don't think it'll match everybody else's definition here. But what we're looking at is a decision between whether we're going to have technocratic regulations mold the internet how we want it, or we're going to have a more organic-based internet, which is what we have had since the internet was invented, where entrepreneurship and innovation drive where the internet goes. Progressives and liberals foresee a hellscape coming from the rollback of net neutrality, in that ISPs tomorrow will stop allowing Netflix and Hulu to be shown and will ask for more money from them and what have you. So they wanted to slap 1939 telecommunications regulations on the internet, like what broke up Ma Bell. I don't know if anybody watching can even remember, Ma Bell, but those were regulations to break up the large telephone organization in the United States and make it more regional and give it to different groups. That was back in 1939. Those regulations aren't fitting, I think, today for the internet, which has always been shown to be driven by innovation and entrepreneurship. So, if given the choice between, and liberals tend to like or tend to fear large technical type of things like this without government regulations. Conservatives and more free traders tend to think if you put government control, bureaucrats are going to ruin it. I think we're going to have it back to where the internet has always been, which is more of an organic, which way it wants to go. Let the innovators decide. Let entrepreneurs decide. So if I had to guess and put my money on whether regulations or kind of free innovation and entrepreneurship were going to make the internet better, I'd go with the innovation and entrepreneurship.
Dr. Tulenko, where do you fall on this issue of net neutrality?
Well, the internet has basically become a utility similar to electricity or
Sure,
water,
yeah.
and so it's essential for everyone. It's particularly essential for folks in rural areas, job seekers, students who need to learn. And so if we roll back net neutrality, there's the possibility to make it more expensive for people. And also, the internet has become one of the major launching pads for new companies in the U.S.
Right.
I think it's very important that we have a level playing field and that we reduce the barriers to entry to the marketplace. And for that reason, I would support the continuing of net neutrality.
But I don't see how getting Netflix and Hulu is a mandatory thing like having electricity or running water in your house.
Well, it's not about Netflix and Hulu. Most people do job searches through the internet. And as a physician, I know that health searches are some of the most common Google searches, and many people manage their chronic conditions through the net. Also for seniors, it's a very important way for them to keep in touch with the wider world as well as with their family. And actually the U.S. is not a leader in internet penetration. There are many countries in Europe and throughout the world that have much higher access to internet. And to me, this should be our area of focus and making sure people have access and that every company, every entrepreneur has an equal opportunity to be seen by a customer as the large guys. We really need that level playing field to have efficient economies.
Well,
Gregory Clay?
Well, this appears to be all in the grand scheme of the Trump administration, the administration's plan for deregulation. I mean, that's basically what it is, and we all know the Donald Trump administration is, wants to deregulate as much as possible in, every industry, every genre. But the thing about it is that now some of the smaller internet companies, I mean, these are like companies, like Crucio out in California and Sonic. These names trip me out big time, and Monkey Business. I mean, you're going to call your company, your internet provider, Monkey Business, et cetera, in other parts of the country.
It's a different day.
Yeah, it's a big time different day. I'm serious, big time, BT. But anyway, I saw a study where some of these companies were asked how they feel about net neutrality, and it was very mixed. Most people probably think, oh no, these small companies want it, they want it badly, because they're scared of Comcast and Verizon and all that. But it was a mixed review. Some of the smaller companies like Crucio and Sonic and Monkey, whatever, felt that they didn't need net neutrality. For one thing, like Larson said earlier, the money. Some of these companies felt that it would cost them so much bread just to keep up with the regulations. See what I'm saying?
It increases the cost of doing business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And that's why some of these smaller internet providers, favor doing away with net neutrality.
To me, this shows how the Trump administration differs from a classic businessman conservative, that the businessman would want the level playing field, would want the conditions for economic growth, but this is rolling back net neutrality instead favors the big guys, favors large corporations rather than having a more level and fair marketplace.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what I always, and I'm a pessimist on everything, and I've been in politics, so I don't believe anything anybody says. If their mouth is moving, they're probably lying. When you see Google, Facebook, Amazon, all for net neutrality, that tells me they want it because it's cheaper to buy political influence and get what you want than it is to buy your competitors or to run a business against your competitors. And with net neutrality, it's all about political influence.
And I'll
So
tell
I
you
think
motives.
this is going to be a discussion that we're going to be having lots more of in the coming days, coming weeks. All right, let's take some questions from our viewers. And our first one is from Gary Manning. And we'll ask you, Dr. Tulenko. Or actually, you know what, I'm going to ask you first with this one. Leif. Yes. Are there any Trump policies that could be seen as friendly to Russia? If not, then what exactly did the Russians get out of the supposed collusion with the Trump campaign?
Well, sure. I think there are probably things that the Trump administration has done that could be seen as being friendly towards the Russians. They rolled back through an executive order they gave back the use of a country club to some of the diplomats here in this country. They used to go to a place, I'm not sure where it is, I think it was somewhere in Maryland, for their R&R, and that was rolled back and given back to them. This was part of the mediocre package of retribution that the Obama administration had put together. Other than that, we'll have to wait and see where things go. If banking regulations are loosened, but I don't know. There's still options out there, and it's early to tell.
All right, and then Dr. Tulenko will ask the question from Melissa Glover to you. And besides repeal of Obamacare or the ACA, is there anything that unites Republicans on health care?
That's a good question because, as I said, there's sort of this separation of the Republicans. You sort of have the mainline business Republicans versus the Trump supporters. As I see it, the mainline business Republicans like Lee Iacocca understand it's important to invest in the health of workers to have a healthy workforce, and you can actually measure changes in worker productivity, based on health, versus the Trump administration that just seems to want to reduce immediate costs. That's what I'm seeing.
All right.
And Bert,
Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, yeah, I was going to say, this is one area in which I agree with Bernie Sanders on. Two things I agree with Bernie on. As long as he doesn't get caught by the FBI, he and his wife.
Let's keep to the
Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
the ACA.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Americans deserve the right
Very quickly,
to health
too.
care, and B, students in the United States don't deserve to have all this debt just to go to college.
All right. Okay, and now it's time for the most underreported story of the week. Who wants to start? Gregory?
Oh,
Mr. Clay. Off you
okay.
go.
Here we go. Okay, I'm going out west, Silicon Valley, Bay Area. There was a situation a few weeks ago, on the BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit. That's the train system, light rail system out there.
Sure.
Okay, 40 to 60 black teenagers basically ambushed some of the cars and beat up some of the passengers and stole their cell phones, money, purses, pocketbooks, et cetera, et cetera. Most of the passengers in that area were white. And the police in the area have the video of the ambush, the rampage. But the police refuses to release the video publicly because they fear, quote unquote, racial bias toward the black teenagers. The white riders on the train, of course, are extremely upset. Many of them are doing what? Suing BART out of safety concerns. It's going to be a major issue, but it won't be covered. Why? Because Donald Trump owns the news cycle 24/7.
Yes.
Well,
Larson.
mine kind of proves a negative against what you just said. Can anybody here tell me what was the biggest accomplishment that came out of the G20 meeting for the Trump administration? Nobody, and that's what the problem is there's a ceasefire that has been holding for the last week now in Syria that was brokered by the United States, the Russians, and the Jordanians. That has now allowed the United Nations to set up negotiations with a lot of these different groups and the Assad government to try to bring a longer lasting ceasefire. And the fact is that is not being covered because everybody would like to cover more about Donald Trump Jr. doing his emails.
He's in the news. Dr. Tulenko, what's your story of the week?
In the last couple of weeks, there have been several research studies published that show that artificial sweeteners are bad for you. People who drink just one can of soda with artificial sweeteners are 3 times more likely to have strokes and dementia.
Whoa.
And so it's shocking. It's shocking. And also, people who consume artificial sweeteners are much more likely to become obese. And already 70% of U.S. adults are obese. So the message is, don't consume artificial sweeteners.
Got you.
Whoa. That Coke from Mexico, from sugarcane.
All right, we need to. So everybody, that's it for this week. So thank you. I'm Simon Harrington, and thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.